be it in work, or in your personal one. So do you think this is good housekeeping? What do you think? So for me, if you will ask me, I'm not really a OC or obsessive compulsive, but I will dread looking at this I mean, if this is my desktop. So be it in your phone or in your desktop, we'll try to keep it as clean as possible. So please, next slide. So good housekeeping is associated very strongly to 5S. So you can see there on your upper right corner, that's the original Japanese term. So Seiton, Shitsuke, Seri, Shiketsu, Seiso. Shiketsu and Seiso. And if you translate it to English, it's not actually the direct translation, but this is the nearest translation. Is the first one is sort. But if you want to take a little bit of it, you want to just pick up those that are important to you in the next maybe following months. If you don't need that for, let's say, 6 months, you try to keep it in your storeroom, or in your case, in your folder, you can say archive. Or if you really don't need it, just delete it. So that's sort. Next is set in order. Another word for that is orderliness, or yeah, we're good at it. Categorization. So that's the second step. Set in order. The next is shine. Shine is cleanliness, or you make sure that okay, this is my daily standard, not yet standard, but this is good. Then you go back to your first round. I mean, first step, sort, set in order, shine, until such time that okay, this one can be a standard. Then you say, okay, this is my standard. I can let my teammate, my housemate, your wife, your best friend. Okay, this is our standard, and we should agree that okay, all our files should start from with numbers. For example, if you're coding, then you can also say all 04 files will be our configuration files, for example, or all our folders for configuration, it's at 004. That's an example of standardization in the software world. In the hardware or manufacturing world, there's a lot of things. Now you will see it on the next slide, but let's go into the sustain. So 1, 2, 3, then 4, then you go back to 1, 2, 3, then 4. Then if you are okay, I mean, if your team is really okay and you agree with your team, then you try to sustain. And actually, the hardest part of this 5S, sustain or discipline, is yeah, that's the hardest part, to sustain what you have learned. Because oftentimes I say, okay, we have overcome that, but yeah, if nobody is looking at it, then we'll just tend to forget, human as we are. So actually, that's the hardest part, to sustain what you have learned over the years. Okay, Aloysius, next slide, please. So 5S in a nutshell. So yeah, I'll just read the text here. 5S was developed in Japan. Actually, it was from Edward Deming. So if you know the story of Edward Deming, a lot of Americans, roughly not everyone really ignore his ideas, but it was actually being celebrated in Japan. That's why it was during after the World War that they implemented this lean concept, and 5S was one of them. So it was developed in Japan and was identified as a technique that enabled just in time. So if you know about the Kanban concept, that's one big part. So just in time. This is even before the agile world. So one of the ultimate outcome of doing 5S is really saving time. So imagine if you take a look at that picture on the right. So Kaizen training outcome, before you have a lot of books there. But then after the implementation, you see there some diagonal lines that is being drawn. It's just a simple implementation of stickers, or maybe just scotch tape or whatever, or maybe a masking tape. Then imagine if you will get one of the books there, then immediately you will see that, okay, it's missing something. So that's one part of standardization and discipline of 5S. It's a simple one, but it's quite very effective. You can use that if you have a physical bookshelf, maybe even in your room or whatever. So that's an outcome of FIDES. And this is the image. So if you will get that link, HTTP scribe. So that guy was the one who wrote that experience out of his FIDES. So that's in a nutshell. This is an introduction. So next slide, please, Aloysius. Thank you. So how does the good housekeeping look like? So in your first graphic that you're seeing there, that's roughly your Kanban, right? So you want to make sure that because people we are people, we are more towards visual. We like to look at graphics, charts. We don't like to uh, have words. I mean, most of us, maybe some of us, little percentage of the population will prefer words rather than graphics. But most of us will really just love graphics. So even if you don't understand English or even Japanese will take a look at this graphics that is on your left, they immediately can say, okay, you have three product backlog increment or PBI topics. Then to do is on two smaller tickets. In progress, you have one, and you have a lot of done there. And it's always, and we try to maintain that this is always updated. I don't know, it's according to a team's standard. So maybe every week, every day, it's up to you. So that's one thing. Another picture that you can take, it's on the hardware world, is that you will see a missing wrench there, and it's clearly painted in black, so it's easy implementation. And lastly is that you have your um, CI/CD or continuous integration and continuous deployment. And we want to see that it's always having these zero bugs, zero vulnerabilities, and so on. Then you always would like to have that passed or the green flag that is being passed. So that's one thing of doing a good housekeeping in a lot of domains, not just in software. Okay, so next slide, Aloysius. Okay, so these are the examples of 5S in the electronic world. It's easy. So first is your inbox. So hopefully your inbox is not like this. Mine is still like this, but I'm trying to learn slowly by I'm doing it like creating folders. So um, this one is for Scrum Master. So you have, yeah, please have a special folder in your Outbox with Scrum Mastery so that if you're really interested, then everything from Scrum Mastery will go to that folder. So that's an example of Firebase application. And maybe for your banks, you don't want to mix it up with your Scrum Mastery Singapore emails. So you should also have that also in a box, or at least in Google, you can, or Gmail, you can also color it with a lot of flags. So, and also in Outlook, it's also been implemented there and other email platforms. Now, desktop home themes, that's on your lower left. Then that's the same picture as I have set on the very first example. So you can also clean it up. And the last one on your right is your file naming convention. So this is, I've got this from the Windows program files or DLL. So you can see there the patterns, like this is API for Microsoft WinCore console, whatever is that. And you also have your client DT plugin. So this is actually from my Eclipse IDE. And there's a pattern there. So it's up to you. You don't need to follow whatever pattern is around, but as long as you or your team, your colleague will agree to it, or maybe your system architect, then that will be your file naming convention. So actually, we have been using that ever since you know about computers, right? So that docx immediately will say, oh, that's a Word document. But actually, if you can name actually that .docx into txt, and computers will still accept it, but it will give you a predictable behavior. So that's just an example of an implementation of how to do this file naming convention. Okay, I think this is it. So next slide, I think that's
That's the end of housekeeping.
that's the end of housekeeping. It's just a premiere. We'll be
Preview.
writing premiere or preview. We'll be writing our articles, our experiences. So I'm the PO. I'm the incoming PO, and I really wish that in this round we are going to share more, or whoever will be joining our sprint 3 will share more out of our own experiences of the effect of, or the better effect of having 5S. And of course we'll also need to talk about what is the um, what's the cost of doing 5S, because it's not for free. There's always this cost. We always need to undergo some kind of a pain. Okay, so that's it from the 5S, or from the Good Housekeeping um, preview.
So
So do
maybe
we
I
have?
just want to add on to something. So
Yeah.
the approach that we actually write this playbook increment is always coming from the perspective of implementation, because I think you can easily find a lot of the content from the internet now on how to on what is housekeeping, or why should we actually do it. I think that's pretty straightforward. That's also what Kenneth is trying to present. But when you're trying to implement this, I think that's where the difficult part comes in. And many times I this is at least my experience of scrum mastering. Um, People was always talking about housekeeping. Hey, isn't that the job of a scrum master? Okay, making sure that everything is in sequence, intent. Like developer, we just develop. So how are you going to even convince them, or probably motivate them that hey, this is really worthy to do it together? And the whole team owns it. I will be talking about all these things, the challenges, the how could we actually do it together, and rally the team to embrace good housekeeping in this case. Yeah. So of course we definitely welcome everybody here. If let's say the team is going to be very huge, we might even we could actually split into a few more, two teams maybe. You're actually contemplating, and then we will divide and conquer and see how we can write this together. So don't have to worry. If let's say the team is too huge, we can always split smaller teams to write together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions on good housekeeping?
Any questions for this topic, good housekeeping, or any comments?
I think sometimes it's undervalued, but it's very important. Certainly maybe a little bit less here, but in your big room, and it's definitely important there. I'm used to be a developer, so I will come from the perspective of the sooner you can visually quickly communicate a bunch of information to the developers, the better. Then they can still see and keep up with what they're doing, and still be focused on production.
Thank you, Jason, for sharing.
Okay.
I think
So
yeah, okay, never mind, it's okay. Because I wanted to emphasize that for good housekeeping, I think it's very important for if you want to scale a job.
Yeah, or any organization,
true.
or
Any skilling. Yep.
yeah, any scaling for that matter.
Yeah, any large organization you need to have good housekeeping. Otherwise, there will be a lot of waste in the value streams.
Definitely. All right. So think whoever I will actually open to the floor to join us on writing the third playbook on good housekeeping. Jason, you're welcome. From a developer perspective.
This is GMT plus, so it's about 12 hours, right?
Yeah. It's 8 a.m. so it's not too bad on the other side.
Nice.
Okay. All right. So we anticipate to end the Good Housekeeping to have a next prayer book on the 19th of July. So this is just a tentative timeline. We will work out the detailed timeline once we have our first Scrum meeting in the spring 3. So our weekly Scrum meeting is every Monday, 8 to 8:30 p.m. Asia
Singapore
time,
time,
not
yeah.
Singapore time, yeah, Malaysia time.
Malaysia
Right.
time.
UMT plus
UTC +8.
UTC plus.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So please fill up the feedback form. This feedback form is actually for you to it's actually variable to us to understand where you are expecting us, where we can fill in the gaps that we never knew, right? And also to identify when is the next playbook to work on after Good Housekeeping. And of course, we hope to have more people join us in this spring 3. Yeah. Okay. All right. So Adrian, we are these are the last slides will be some reference that we actually make on to prepare our Good Housekeeping slides. Yeah.